And I'm going to say that Fnatic doesn't make Worlds this year with their roster. As strong as it is on the paper, right? Let me explain. Okay. I think that a stacking of talent, the way Fnatic does, usually works pretty poorly. And if you look at the change they've made, I think that statistically, Upset, while not being a choker like Noah was, is definitely not the kind of guy that like edges a series out, which is like the key skill that Fnatic has been looking forward to acquire with him. And I think on top of that, there is a big question mark about Mickey X. I still think last year he was like among the best supports while playing pretty poorly. But I think the body language, energy that he has shown with G2 at Worlds, the amount of misplay and the kind of erratic plays he's been making, I don't see him like leaving G2 and doing, you know, the effort of becoming a leader in a team again, like that late in his career. He has done it in Excel back then. You know, Excel was like a contender when Mickey came. Then he came back to G2, but I feel like the tank feels empty when I watch the player. And I don't think like his combination with Upset, who's someone who's very demanding, is gonna allow him to like move freely around the map and solve the kind of inherent problem that we've seen from Humanoid, Razork, and Oscarinin throughout years now, right? Like it's been even with Wunder at the top, like I think 2.5 or 3 years ago. I think that this pairing of Humanoid and Razork clearly shows weakness throughout the mid game. Like they don't know how they want to play the game. The only thing they kind of know is like sit down at Dragon and wait for the opponent, do 5v5, and if the opponent goes on side lane, everybody's lost. And I don't think a support can fix your side wave management. I don't think a support can create, you know, creative plays like this. So I kind of think that this, as strong as it seems on the paper, I think there is a significant chance that this Fnatic roster is not going to be as strong as people expect. Therefore, with other rosters being up and coming with, I think, more motivated players and less systemic issues, they have more chance to reach Worlds eventually this year. I think they're going to start very strong this year, but I think the more the year goes, the more other teams are going to catch up, and the systemic problems of Fnatic are going to be kind of their downfall for the late part of the year.
By the way, just for one last clarification, which is, you hinted at it at the end there, but the reason I also think this take is mega spicy, you could just look at the Fnatic angle. Like, obviously, a lot of people think they can be the contender to G2 even, maybe. Like, maybe if the Scuba guy isn't good or Labrov doesn't work out, maybe Fnatic's going to win the league. They've got grabs, they've got all these big name players, like we say, right? I would ask this question. It's not just the Fnatic angle. Obviously, a lot of people, when they look at the names, Zabatine, there's a lot of VRL talents coming into some of the Vitalities, the Rex of the world. A lot of people won't know these players at all. Are you actually expecting these to be the teams that knock out the Fnatic and take their world spot? Because that's the part I think that will make people think it's a slam dunk. Forget they get to Worlds, right? Because the roster strength.
I mean, I feel like you have like the top two, historical top two, and then you have teams that can be good, right? You have Rogue that can be good, even people dismiss it for names because people hate on Patrick for no reason. You have KC that can be good. You have Mad that can be good. You have BDS that can be good. You have GX that potentially can be good. And all these teams, I think the bottom, like Heretics, Vitality can be good, but I think it's kind of a wild card there at this point. But all these teams can upset, you know, a team such as Fnatic out of the top three. I think people such as Caps and Broken Blade kind of guarantee you that, like, to edge it out in series, because they know side lane management, they know creative play, they know TP, they've shown it years and years with different teammates, different series, different level of pressure. They kind of know how to win a series when kind of like shit goes south. Where when you watch Fnatic, if they can't teamfight a dragon, everybody's lost around the map. It's not Oscarina that's gonna create a side play, like a side play or something. So because of that, I think the packing of level through the LEC is pretty dense, and I think that Fnatic stylistically can be beaten by all these coming teams because there is a lot of like mid-tier teams that are very, very good potentially later in the year.
Okay.
Right? Like the one I mentioned.
What do you think, Kira?
So here's the thing. In some ways, I have some concerns about Fnatic. I won't hold hands on this take because I do think they will make Worlds. I can't say I agree, but what I will say about Fnatic is I actually don't think the roster is as plug and play as many of the other rosters in the league, and there's some major concerns. So right now, the best player on Fnatic is Razork, right? And he might be the best player in Europe. He might be the best player in the whole league. Possibly, okay? Depending on your opinion. However, if you look historically, I don't know why it is, I'm not going to speculate too much why, when Razork plays with Upset, it makes Razork worse as a player. Now, I don't know if that's Upset or how those teams are structured at the time, but historically, like Razork's like ability of like playing to like 3 lanes, full map coverage, like the very, very good Razork that we think of did not align with Upset ever being on the team. Now, that might just be to do with Upset, that could be to do with Razork, it could have been the coaching staff at the time. There's so many different variables there. That is like my first concern, that you're possibly taking the piece that gave you the most, basically, most of Fnatic's games was, does Razork have a good game? If Razork doesn't have a good game, the game can't be won. The correlation to like Razork's performance to game victory for Fnatic was absolutely like bonkers. That he basically just could not have like bad days. It's why like a lot of their finals against like G2 were like so underwhelming because Razork wasn't really that good in any of the finals. I've just went back and rewatched them recently. He doesn't play well in basically any of the finals, and actually like Razork being a choker like has to kind of like be started talked about because he doesn't. I can't think of the finals where he did play like really, really well. The other thing is like Osgrennan isn't really going to play for the traditional like Upsets, like traditional style of play of like what he wants in a top laner, whereas like Osgrennan wants to be like a progressive map state, run with his advantage solo laner, whereas Upset more likely prefers someone who's going to play for a mid-game team fight where he spikes on 2 items, 2.5 items. And there's nothing wrong with that because historically that's worked very, very, very well in Europe and it's worked very, very well in Upset's career. Osgrennan isn't going to do that. Osgrennan's a psychopath, arguably brainless at times. So I can actually see where Fnatic goes wrong. Like, I actually don't think this take is completely out of the question. The only thing that the pushback I would give is you're also not considering that the other rosters in Europe could also just go to shit, and like Fnatic don't actually have to be that good to just make it on player strength. Like, Fnatic were a better team this year when they like made Worlds, but I think they can actually make it just on like player strength. I actually don't think they have to actually be that good as like a group of players to make Worlds, because like plenty of things could go wrong in loads of these teams for them to just kind of like end up with the spot. Because I think a lot of teams would have to be like really, really good and a lot better than people consider for them to not make it. But I can actually see where it comes from, because I think this team's got massive variables for actually being good.
Like, the good news and the bad news is I sort of agree a little bit like Kira. Like, I do think there are, like, pretty sure I'm with you. I don't think it's like a slam dunk that this team has to work and that, like, everyone will work in the squad and that even just having names works. I actually think one thing everyone's discovered in League of Legends, I would say over the last 5 to 6 years, is it is true. Back in the day, pure name value almost guaranteed you a certain level of performance. Like, if you put in these three, just the big names, if you just put in Razork, Humanoid, Upset, and Mickey X, you would almost be guaranteed to make like the semis or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that'll be like a bad tournament run. But I do think in the modern day it is about things like by the way, I've seen this from Fnatic last year, and if you go back a couple of years, 100 Thieves, if you can't play late game macro, you will have an incredibly hard time ever winning a championship in League of Legends anymore. Like, those days have sailed where you can just win the lane. Like, in fact, actually the G2s of the world have shown that you can even be behind in every fucking game and still win if you're the better late game team. So I will say, I see why you're framing that for Fnatic, because that is the main question I have for Mickey X. There's two parts. One, I agree with you completely. He is not, I can tell you, I actually know him actually of the G2 players. He's one of the players like Perks I know a little bit better. He's not at all a leadership type figure. It's not even the type of person he'd try and be, Zabatine. In fact, I can even tell you, even when he's been in teams where maybe they wanted that from him, like when he had Reckless, for example, his style was more like, you know, do my best, but then if like Reckless is being annoying, it's like, oh well, fuck, see you next year, I guess. It wasn't like, you know, let's have some big fucking argument or let's like have a come to Jesus moment, like an intervention and go to management. No, just say, oh well, didn't work. Like, yeah, I'm just path of least resistance, we say in English. Like, you don't want to be a big drama. Now, I will say, it Upset, luckily, unlike Reckless, the problem you have with Reckless is this. Reckless is the girlfriend that wants you to guess what he wants you to do, but he can't tell you, because if he tells you, then you're not the right guy for him, if you get the analogy. Here's the good news. Upset is incredibly German in that sense. He is going to very explicitly, very straightforward tell you at all times what he wants from you. And in this scenario, I actually think they will somewhat be like a good pairing in that sense, especially because, I'll just say it right now, I actually think Upset and Hylissang was way better than Kazi and Hylissang ever was. So I actually thought he was one of the few people who actually was able to like keep Hylissang somewhat on side. In fact, I even think that summer split they had together, Hylissang was completely fucking almost like inting it, but they somehow played through that and still had success. So that aspect makes me not as scared about the leadership part. But I get what you mean on that. I do think this team still, obviously, if you look at the 5 names, lacks an actual out-of-the-game leader, like the guy with the big presence who will give the speech and will discipline people. I don't think they have that, which, by the way, means I put a lot of that on Grabs. I think Grabs actually has to be like fucking masterful in that respect, which, by the way, that was the reputation he earned in G2 as the coach. He's supposed to be the man management coach, not the X's and O's. So that's big. I'll also add in Mickey X was his guy from G2, so he's obviously coming in with someone that's his. Thing is, I put a lot of it on Mickey X, because here's the thing. I actually thought, even at his worst last year, the one thing you could still rely on Mickey X for was in the mid-game, he will just make a player that's like a diamond player. Like, I mean, as in like a brilliant player. He'll just make like a game-winning play, like a move that like actually like changes the dynamic of what's happening, or gives you, or pulls you out of the hole, etc. So I have to put, I am hoping he's going to essentially be, I won't say the shot calling, I don't think that's his style either, but he's going to be the person who can to some degree offset some of their late game problems. I do think that was a massive problem this team had. I still have my issues with the Razork humanoid thing. I mean, I think Monty's right. At this point in time, no one really actually thinks they're an awesome combo. That's why that topic's been talked to death. It's just because in Fnatic, you know, nobody will take humanoid's contract. What's the point in even bringing it up? You might as well just say, no, it's all fine. Don't worry about it, because that's just the reality you all have to live in if you're in Fnatic. But I don't agree overall. Like, my problem is this. I do think that if you have those 4 names, Razork, Humanoid, Upset, and Mickey X, it's possible you could not make Worlds, but I think you will. Like, I still think this will be a good team. I think it'll be the second best team in the LEC. I think it'll work out. I also throw this in as well. I actually think people like Upset, when they have the year they had before, they might not show it publicly, but they do get humbled, by the way. Like, they do know that, like, right, I have to, like, I can't come in as, like, the big boss next year. I have to, like, sort of work my way back into it and show I'm really good again. But I'll just say this. Those 4 players, I won't say that for Oscarin, but those 4 players potentially can each be the best in their role. Bit of a push for Humanoid because Caps is there, but he'd still be second or third. That's not a crazy thought. If they can do that, I don't think they can really be 5th and not make Worlds. But by the way, I like it as a hot take, though. I do think it's a spicy hot take.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.